to Alan Drinks Whiskey and Talks About Books. I've wanted to do this for a while. Welcome to the YouTube show with the lowest production value. I have a giant whiteboard, I have some whiskey, and I have a book. So, I don't know what to expect with this. I just thought this would be kind of a fun little thing to do. It's combining two of my favorite things to do: drink whiskey, talk about books. And so, here we go. I'm not an artist, as you can tell from my logo that I drew in about 10 seconds. And we'll see how this goes. I'm sure there are elements of production that can be greatly improved upon. But really, I'm just doing this for fun. I'm just doing this to maybe entertain a couple of folks. Mostly myself. Most of the things that I put online are to entertain myself. So, without further ado, let's talk a little bit about Brave New World today. That's going to be episode 1. So, I'm in a lot of reading groups on Facebook, book lovers, reading addicts, things like that. And every now and again I come across this tweet that people post to sort of generate discussion. And it says that by the time, and the tweet is basically, by the time you graduate high school, you should have picked one of these books to obsess over for the rest of your life. And it lists like Animal Farm, the Bible, the Communist Manifesto, Twilight might be in there. I can't remember all of them. But that's, there's like 5 books that you should do. And then, there's a good selection there of books that people do obsess over that they usually encounter in their high school days. But the book for me that I encountered in high school that I still obsess over, love to teach this book, is Brave New World. So this copy actually, so I was assigned to read Brave New World as a senior in high school, and I loved it to the point where I went out and purchased my own copy of Brave New World and actually kept it in my truck, like pickup if you want to get technical. So if I was ever stranded somewhere, I would have something to read. This was before smartphones, before the Kindle app was invented, and so this is what I kept in my car just in case of emergencies. And every now and again when I get bored, I'd reach for it, I'd go through it. And I was kind of thinking before this episode, why is that? Why am I obsessed with Brave New World, or why did it resonate with me so much? Because it's not like it's a happy ending. It's not like this dystopian fiction that you have for young adults today where the plucky band of teenagers overthrows the government. No. Opposite happens in Brave New World. The protagonist, spoiler alert, gets sent to islands and one dies at the end. So it's not like it's an uplifting thing. So what I basically came down to is I love the ideas in this book. And one of the things that I do, and I teach this book to seniors, one of the things that I stress over and over again when I teach Brave New World is this is a warning. Huxley is not advocating in any way, shape, or form this society. It's a warning. So please keep that in mind if you do read this book. And he's warning about a society that over-relies on technology, that shies away from discomfort and looks for easy way outs. It's a society that just, I don't know, it kind of sucks. Yeah, there's no crime, everyone's healthy, everyone's happy all the time, but it's a shallow happiness. And I think in this day and age that can be really poignant because, we live in a place, in a time where there's great technological abilities, we can be more connected than ever, but I think our happiness is kind of shallow because it's not true. It's not ourselves. It's technology filling in for us. Our cell phones are our soma, if you will. And so I just think it's a really, I find it to be a really interesting read. And so I think that's why it resonated with me. Even back then in 2003 when I was, a wee lad of 18 years old, but now that and I'm 35, 17 years later, I'm still obsessing over this book and still poring over it whenever I teach it and still learning new things and still connecting it to today. And that's what I think what literature does. It can connect. Good literature, or at least maybe it's just literature that resonates with you, allows you to connect to the world. And even though Huxley is writing this in, I believe, the 1920s, it still resonates today. The themes, the morals, the lessons, the warnings, they still resonate today because we are a society that over-relies on technology. We're a society that chases a cheap happiness. And we are a society that doesn't want to have uncomfortable conversations or discomforts. In fact, near the end of this book, Mustafa Mond, who's kind of the head guy in charge, he has a conversation with John the Savage, and John says, "I like the inconveniences," and Mond responds, "But we don't." John makes the argument that those inconveniences are what makes life living. You know what Mond says? No, we don't want it. So I've picked out 3 quotes from this book because there are 3 quotes that I think really get into what this book is about and also I think are really pertinent today. So I'll read them and discuss them. And then I'll drink some whiskey and we'll call it good there. So the first one is, and I believe it's in chapter 3. And Mond here is talking. He's actually giving a tour to a bunch of, I've always kind of interpreted them as college kids, but I don't actually know how old they are. It's never specified. Just in my head, they've always been college kids. If you watched the terrible made-for-TV movie with Peter Gallagher as Bernard Marx, which does not make any sense, because Bernard Marx is supposed to be ugly, and Peter Gallagher he's not known for being ugly. It's like school-age children, but I always picture them older in the book. But that movie is trash, and don't ever watch it. But he's giving background. This book is basically, it starts with one big info dump. It says, this is how our society works, and this is why we set it up this way. And here, Mond is explaining why they got rid of families, why they got rid of love. Because to Mond in this society, if you have something other than your job that you are fighting for, if you have something other than the society that you love and you will sacrifice for, then bad things happen. Stability, said the controller. Stability. No civilization without social stability. No social stability without individual stability. His voice was a trumpet. Listening, they felt larger, warmer. The machine turns, and must keep on turning forever. It is death if it stands still. 1,000 millions scrabbled to the crust of the earth. The wheels began to turn. In 150 years, there were 2,000 millions. Stop all the wheels. In 150 weeks, there are once more only 1,000 millions. 1,000 men and women have starved to death. Wheels must turn steadily, but cannot turn untended. There must be men to tend them. Men as steady as the wheels upon their axles, same men, obedient men, stable in contentment. Crying, my baby, my mother, my only love, groaning, my sin, my terrible God, screaming with pain, muttering with fever, bemoaning old age and poverty. How can they tend the wheels? And if they cannot tend the wheels, the corpses of 1,000 men and women would be hard to bury or burn. I was thinking about that part and that line a lot during this time, this pandemic, because I feel like we've been forced to make a choice between work and the economy and tending the wheels and keeping them turning and our lives and our health. You see the states right now that are reopening and have spikes in cases. And I just think, what if there was a different solution? What if we had not done it like this? What if we had, followed maybe a European model and we didn't have to worry about making ends meet during this time? And what if we could just have focused on keeping ourselves healthy and safe? And where would we be at as a country? What would our numbers be like? But in this society, this grand capitalistic society that Huxley is imagining, everything from your health to your family obligations should be secondary to keeping the wheels of the economy going. Because if those wheels stop, people die. And there's some truth to that. But it's also a false choice. And I think in these times of global pandemics, it's a choice that maybe didn't need to be made the way that it was. But we've made it. For better or probably for worse. But the bad side is I think we made the decision to keep the wheels turning, but we never considered what's going to be the cost of trying to bury or burn 1,000 men and women. So that quote had been going on through my head a lot during this. The next quote that I'm going to pull from this is just one of the reasons why another reason why I think that this book really resonated with me, and it's the writing. That first quote that I pulled, I really like the writing in that part. Basically, anytime that Mond talks in this book, I don't like him, but I love what he says. I just love how he articulates his positions. I love his way with words. Huxley's a really good writer, and it shows in this book. I think that's why it's endured for so long. But this is from chapter 7, and this is when John the Savage is kind of recounting his life story. And this is a part where he's been kind of rejected by the community for being different. And at its core, that's what this book is about. It's about being different in a society in which you're supposed to conform. That kind of sounds familiar. What are the expectations for people as we enter into the workforce, as we go to college? What are the expectations of our young people? How are they supposed to conform? And is there a way to still be individual while conforming? And this book kind of goes back and forth on that. Helmholtz Watson and Bernard Marx share the knowledge that they're individuals in this world where they're supposed to conform. Then you enter John the Savage, who knows he's an individual for very different reasons. His skin color is different from the people around him. So there's racial elements in this book as well. And John is very aware that he doesn't fit in, but he doesn't know what to do about it. And faced with rejection, he recounts it like this. All alone outside the pueblo, on the bare plain of the mesa, the rock was like bleached bones in the moonlight. Down in the valley, the coyotes were howling at the moon. The bruises hurt him, the cuts were still bleeding, but it was not for pain that he sobbed, it was because he was all alone, because he had been driven out, alone, into the skeleton world of rocks and moonlight. At the edge of the precipice, he sat down. The moon was behind him. He looked down into the black shadows of the mesa, into the black shadow of death. He had only to take one step, one little jump. He held out his right hand in the moonlight. From the cut on his wrist, the blood was still oozing. Every few seconds, a drop fell, dark, almost colorless in the dead light. Drop, drop, drop. Tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow. He had discovered time and death and God. I love that line. I get chills every time I read it. And I think too, for young people, I think we come to a point. I shouldn't say we. I'm in my mid-30s now, but I work with high schoolers, so I say we a lot when I talk about young people. But they're wrestling with grand ideas and grand things that are bigger than themselves. And I think for a lot of them, it clicks all of a sudden. And hopefully, when they discover time and death and God, it's not nearly as dramatic as it is for John the Savage, but for some of them it is. I don't really have much to connect with that one. I just really like that quote and wanted to talk about it, and it's my show. I'm calling the shots, so there we go. The last quote that I'm going to talk about here is at the end. The final section of this book is really a debate between Mustafa Mond, who represents authority, the man, control, and John the Savage, who is the opposite. He represents the individual, liberty, all of those good things. And they have a debate about what makes a good society, what makes a just society. And Mond, you might not like the things that Mond says, but they do have a society that has no crime, no illness, everyone at least claims to be happy, everyone belongs to everyone else, there's no loneliness, there's no poverty, at least that we see. The society seems to be good. But John asks, but at what cost? You don't have art. You don't really have science, because you only have science that proves that what you're doing is the best way to do it. So you sacrificed a lot. And Mon says, it's worth it. And really, it's hard to disagree with them. They pulled it off. They have a society that works really, really well. But John says, but there's more to it than that. And their discussion, more or less, ends like this. I'm going to go back a page. And they're talking about, John basically says, people need to get angry. They need to get sad. Because that's what makes life living. If you're just happy all the time, that's not great. And Mon's like, well, we have that. So it says, exposing what is mortal and ensure to all that fortunate death and danger dare, even for an eggshell. Isn't there something in that? He asked, looking up at Mustafa Mon. This is John talking. Quite apart from God, though of course God would be a reason for it. Isn't there something in living dangerously? There's a great deal in it, the controller replied. Men and women must have their adrenals stimulated from time to time. What? Questioned the savage, uncomprehending. It's one of the conditions of perfect health. That's why we've made the VPS treatment compulsory. VPS? Violent passion surrogate. Regularly, once a month, we flood the whole system with adrenaline. It's the complete physiological equivalent of fear and rage. All the tonic effects of murdering Desdemona and being murdered by Othello, without any of the inconveniences. But I like the inconveniences. We don't, said the controller. We prefer to do things comfortably. But I don't want comfort. I want God. I want poetry. I want real danger. I want freedom. I want goodness. I want sin. In fact, said Mustafa Mon, you're claiming the right to be unhappy. All right then, said the savage defiantly. I'm claiming the right to be unhappy. Not to mention the right to grow old and ugly and impotent, the right to have syphilis and cancer, the right to have too little to eat, the right to be lousy, the right to live in constant apprehension of what may happen tomorrow, the right to catch typhoid, the right to be tortured by unspeakable pains of every kind. There was a long silence. I claim them all, said the savage at last. Mustafa Mon shrugged his shoulders. You're welcome, he said. And it is kind of interesting, because nobody wants to have a life with all those things that Mond listed. We don't want to have syphilis, and we don't want to be tortured, and we don't want to worry about tomorrow. But John says, you have to take the good and the bad. That's full of life, and you can't just control people and say that you've made them happy. But Mond says, we can, we did, and if you're not happy about it, sucks to be you. So, why I like this book so much is that it makes you think. Because, Mond, for example, he says pretty reasonable things. His goals seem to be fine. His methods, very questionable. But the society they do build, for some people, might be very appealing. And he says in the book, in fact, Mond does, that eventually people just asked for this. This is what they wanted. We tried to do it other ways, but this was the path of least resistance. But John says there's something to living on that path of more resistance. There's something to be said about taking a stand and damning the man and going through hardships that makes you appreciate stuff all the more. So, but, I don't know. I just really like this book. I like the way that it makes me think. I like the way that it makes my students think. Every time I teach this, I have great conversations with them. So that's that. So, let's raise a glass to Brave New World, to Aldous Huxley, to thinking, and to the right to be unhappy. So this is the first episode of Alan Drinks Whiskey and Talks About Books. The book was Brave New World. The whiskey was Tullamore Dew. That'll probably be the whiskey most times on this show. I'm sure there's a million things that I could do to improve this. Please let me know what they are. But again, I'm really just doing this for fun, and hopefully you enjoyed it too. So, thanks for watching. Happy reading, happy drinking, and we'll see you the next time.